Hey guys, in today's video we're going to go over ROSÉ's On The Ground, which has generated a lot of buzz in the past week, reaching #1 in the Billboard Top 200. Now for those of you who don't know ROSÉ, she's a member of the K-pop group BLACKPINK, and this actually is her first single as a solo act. The song is produced by one of my favorite artists of all time called Bellion, alongside Jorgen, Odegard, Ojivolta and 24. Now I'm beyond excited to dive into the production process, but first let's listen to a preview of my remake. The verse begins with an electric guitar that almost has a western cowboy sound. To replicate that sound, I added the Waves GDR Stomp amplifier plugin to achieve the same sound of the beginning progression of the song. I added some overdrive to crush the sound a bit and give it some distortion, followed by some vibrato, which in turn helps create the slight pitch bends at the end of each chord, as well as some waviness to the texture of the sound. Followed by that, I have the decapitator running to bring the guitar more forward. I then added another gem by Waves, which is their S1 imager, to create some dimension in the mix by widening the signal. I then have an EQ to tame some of the excess distortion and overlapping grid that any of the plugins may have created, in order to have more balance in our mix. Lastly, I have of course my favorite reverb plugin, Vintage Verb, to create atmosphere. Furthermore, we have another electric guitar playing that is panned to the right that I did not need to do much processing on actually. There's only some subtle EQ on there to remove unnecessary information below 100 Hz. 20 seconds in, a strummed acoustic guitar starts playing, and for this guitar we're using session guitarist Strummed Acoustic 2, emulating the strumming pattern as heard in the original, and I found the Home Again preset to be closest to the original. In terms of processing, I'm applying some light EQ to eliminate any unnecessary low end and open the guitar up a bit with some slight boosts around 1.5K and 10K to create more airiness and shine with the sound. I also made a slight adjustment in the low mids to get rid of any muddiness. Followed after that is the One Knob Feather by Waves to bring some fatness and warmth to the overall guitar sound. As a guitar layer, I'm using the picked acoustic guitar within Contact that I then tweaked to be more tailored to the original record and melody. For processing, there was only need for some slight EQ adjustments by a dB here and there. I then have another layer playing a scratching guitar effect to help with emulating a humanized feel within the record for the listener to hear and feel each flick on the guitar. I added an equalizer for this one to cut out any unnecessary lows and suppress a resonance I heard around 218 Hz, which sounds like this. I also added some stereo width to both guitar layers using the S1 imager with a width setting of 140 to widen the overall sound. The final guitar I used is this bass guitar called the Retro 60s by Trillion, probably my favorite emulation of a bass guitar, which plays the bass notes as well as this cool bass line. For the synth pads, we're using, and you guessed it, my favorite free VST plugin called Labs, using their basic synth pad presets that I confidently believe deliver some of the highest quality sounds you can find in terms of accessibility and price point. These pads serve as an anchor to the guitars, and to be quite honest, they sounded very neat on their own, so I did not apply any processing. I only panned the two of them to create a more three-dimensional sonic landscape and adjusted the faders accordingly. I also automated the pitch of the second path to create the following ambient synth sound. For the synth arp in the background, we're using a Spire preset that I slightly modified. For the processing, there's not much going on besides a nice boost to the high end to really brighten the sound up, as well as a low cut to get rid of any unnecessary low frequencies. And to achieve the spacious and warm decay of the original, I added Vintage Verb. The sound of the chorus seems to be influenced by analog synths from the 70s and 80s, such as the Moog and the Jupiter 8, as it features very thick and lush synth waves coming from that era, delivered with a modern twist. And the synth bass we're hearing is composed of a few layers. For our main synth lead, we're using a Moog that can be found in the Analog Lab VST by Arturia. On the mixer channel, I started with a Camel Crusher to add some distortion to the sound, followed by an OTT for some extra brightness by introducing some highs. I then follow up with a Tel chorus to add some more tonality to the sound, and together with Sound Goodizer and again Waves One Knob Feather to really accentuate our synth and make it sound more fat and present. I then have an EQ to boost some of the low mids for some more warmth, as well as boosting at 2500 and 10K Hz to add some spark. I then added a touch of compression and boosted the width of the sides to have as wide of a sound possible. I also have two brass layers from Contact's retro machines to complement the main synth lead in terms of body, which I processed using a Camel Crusher for distortion, an OTT for some sharpness, an EQ to clean it up, and an S1 imager for extra width. The other main synth bass, the one that is playing the bass line, is very similar to the synth lead in terms of processing, but is slightly different in terms of sound design, as it has a slower attack, which makes it sound more like a brass synth. I also sidechained the synth lead to this bass using multiband compression, ensuring that the high mids and high frequencies of the bass duck whenever the lead is playing, providing the lead with more room in the mix. We then also have a Jupiter 8 emulation playing in the background that plays the same bass line throughout the chorus and serves as a layer to the synth bass. I linked all of these bass sounds and layers to this bass bus where I inserted Neutron by Isotope to make it tighter, an EQ to smoothly remove information above 15k and to again boost the low mids, Infected Mushroom Pusher to make the sound more present in the mix, and a Vintage Verb that is controlled by a P controller, meaning that the reverb signal is decreased when the synth bass is playing. Finally, there is a sub bass from Sublab that follows the bassline melody, processed only using an EQ to remove everything above 250 Hz and make everything below 150 mono. The bottom part of its frequency spectrum also ducks every time the kick hits because of the multiband sidechain compression I applied using Pro MB. Moving on to the drums, I found this kick sample which was quite similar to the original one, and I found it in the Singular Sounds pack on Splice, which was curated by Grey, which is an amazing production duo that I would definitely recommend you to go check out when you get a chance. There's quite a lot of movement on the kick drum rhythm, which gives the chorus a groovy feel. To bring some extra punch and boom to the 40 to 80 Hz range of the kick, I used an R bass and an EQ simply high passing everything below 30 Hz. Then there is a snare hitting on every second and fourth beat, composed of 4 layers that I combined in order to get them sounding as close as possible to the original. For the processing, I'm using a snare bus that has an EQ on it, followed by some compression for extra punch, and then ending with a subtle reverb. Then in the second part of the chorus, some tambourines are introduced, and I reproduced the swing rhythm using the 16 drummer swing 1 preset in FL Studio's quantization tool. Finally, there is a downlifter on every second and fourth beat, enhancing the overall feel and power of the snare in the second half of the chorus. And that's it. If you made it this far in the video, I would be thrilled if you destroyed that like button and if you considered subscribing, as I would love to welcome you to become a part of our ever-growing community. Let's now listen to my complete remake.